Hallelujah. Shalom, family. Greetings to the 12 tribes of Yisrael scattered abroad. We're going to start in Bamidbar or Numbers chapter 15. Speak unto the children of Yisrael, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a riband of blue. Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 22. You shall make you fringes upon the four quarters of your vesture, wherewith you cover yourself. This is a commandment given to the children of Yisrael. However, most people do not understand that these are two separate commandments. So we're going to investigate what these commandments actually mean and how we are to practice these commandments. Bamidbar or Numbers chapter 15. And Yahuwah spoke unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto the children of Yisrael, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a riband of blue. And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that you may look upon it, and remember all the commandments of Yahuwah, and do them, and that you seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you used to go a-whoring, that you may remember and do all my commandments, and be set apart unto your Elohim. I am Yahuwah your Elohim, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, to be your Elohim. I am Yahuwah your Elohim. So we see that Yahuwah stamps his name twice upon this commandment of making the fringe, placing his signet, sealing this commandment that it will not change. We see that the Hebrew word that's translated in English as fringe is tzitzit, and the word for garment is beged, and the word for blue is tekelet. Tzitzit, a fringe, tassel, lock. A floor or wing-like projection that is a forelock of hair. Tzitzit is used only 4 times in the Tanakh. 3 of the times that it is used are in the passage we read in Numbers chapter 15. The other time it is used is in Hezekiel or Ezekiel chapter 8. And it came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I sat in my house, and the elders of Yehudah sat before me, that the hand of Adonai Yahuwah fell there upon me. Then I beheld, and lo, a likeness as the appearance of fire, from the appearance of his loins even downward, fire, and from his loins even upward, as the appearance of brightness, as the color of amber. And he put forth the form of a hand, and took me by a lock of my head, and the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heaven. So the word there in English, lock, is translated from the Hebrew tzitzit. So the lock of the head, the lock of Ezekiel's head, was called tzitzit. When we look at the images of Israelites going into exile on the walls of the Assyrians, we see that many of the Hebrew men wore their hair in locks. So when we look at the locks around the head, it is also similar to the tzitzit going around the edge of the garments that they wore. So we see that they wore the tzitzit or the fringe upon their garments, the undergarment and also the overgarment. When we look at the word beged, beged is a general term for clothing. So that includes the undergarment and also the wrap or the other overgarment. There are different traditions and systems of knotting the tzitzit, the fringe that goes along the edge of the garment. However, we're not going to get into those traditions of men in this video. We want to stick to what is actually commanded in the Torah. The word translated as blue is tekelet, which means violet, violet stuff. Blue, covering spectrum from brilliant red through deep purple. The cerulean muscle, that is the color, violet, obtained thereof of stuff dyed therewith. The word for garment is beged, which means garment or clothing. Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 22. You shall not wear a garment of diverse sorts, as of woolen and linen together. You shall make you fringes upon the four quarters of your vesture, wherewith you cover yourself. So we see here in Deuteronomy that the word that is translated as fringe comes from the Hebrew gedil, and the word for vesture is kasut. Gedil, twisted threads, tassels, festoons. Kasut, covering, clothing, veiling. So when we look at the commandment in Numbers 15 and the commandment in Deuteronomy 22, we will discover that these are two separate commandments. The word used for fringe in Numbers 15 is tzitzit, and the word in Deuteronomy is gedil. These are two completely different Hebrew words, even though they're translated with the same English word. We see in Numbers 15 that there's a requirement of putting a band of blue upon the tzitzit, whereas Deuteronomy doesn't mention anything about color. And in Deuteronomy, there is the commandment of putting 4, whereas in Numbers 15, there is no number mentioned. And in Numbers 15, it says to put it upon your garment or beged, which is the basic Israelite garment, the undergarment, a robe. Whereas in Deuteronomy, it talks about putting it on the kasut. The kasut is an overgarment. So when we look at these words as they were translated in the Septuagint, the word for fringe in Numbers 15 is crespida. And the word for blue is akinthos. And the word for fringe in Deuteronomy is crespidon. So crespidon is singular, whereas crespida is plural. So in Deuteronomy, there are to be 4 single crespidon, or 4 single gadalim, from the word gadil in Hebrew. whereas in Numbers 15, the fringes upon the borders is plural. So when we look at the word tekelet, which is translated into English as blue in Numbers 15, it means bluish violet or blue in Hebrew, as translated as hyacinthos in the Greek. Hyacinthus is a small genus of bulbous, spring-blooming perennials. They are fragrant flowering plants and are commonly called hyacinths. The genus is native to the area of the eastern Mediterranean from the north of Bulgaria through to the northern part of the region of Palestine. The color of the blue flower hyacinth plant varies between mid-blue, violet blue, and bluish purple. So we see that tekelith, or that blue mentioned in Numbers 15, ranges from blue to violet to purple. Shemot, or Exodus 22. If you at all take your neighbor's raiment to pledge, you shall deliver it unto him by that the sun goes down. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin. Wherein shall he sleep? And it shall come to pass, when he cries unto me, that I will hear, for I am gracious. So the word for covering is that same word used in Deuteronomy 22, kasuth. So the kasuth is the overgarment. It is like a wrap or a blanket. So this is something that the ancient Israelites would use as a jacket. And they would also use it as a blanket when they slept at night. When we look at the modern tallit, commonly called a prayer shawl, we see that the 4 tassels at the corners are what modern Jews commonly call the Tzitzit or the Tzitziot in plural. However, those 4 tassels at the corners are what the Torah in Deuteronomy 22 calls the Gadil or the Gadalim. So we see that there's some confusion between what modern Jews call Tzitzit and what the Bible calls Tzitzit. The biblical Tzitzit is the fringe along the edge of the garment. And again, the modern tallit, which is commonly called a prayer shawl, in the Torah, the kasuth was not a religious garment. It was an everyday garment that all Israelites wore, and it identified them as Israelites. It's not something that they only wore when they went to prayer.
So, for example, what we're looking at here is you can really see the mantle hanging over the person, the man. You can really see the hat. You can really see underneath it the tunic with all the fringes. So let's try and explain what all this was in ancient Israel. This man's mantle or robe, the outer garment, in Hebrew would have been called a simlah, or a kasut, or a ma'il. Different ways to say the same thing of an outer garment. Now, the outer garment was the most important garment in ancient Israel because for most people, it's what you slept in. You didn't have a comforter at night. You would sleep in your garment, so you had to make sure that you had one. And for this reason, there are a number of laws which say that you can't take the garment from a poor person. Now, notice that there are all these tassels on this garment. Now, this is what we believe were actually the ancient Israelite tzitzit. The tzitzit, or the tassels, that in later Judaism would be placed on the 4 corners of a garment. Here we actually see them all around the 4 sides of the garment. So these little tassels here are an important part of the Israelite dress.
So when we look at Numbers chapter 15, in different translations, we will see that there is an issue going on here. In the King James, it says, "Speak unto the children of Yisrael, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a riband of blue." However, when we go into the New King James, it's translated as, "Speak to the children of Yisrael, tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a blue thread in the tassels of the corners." And in the NIV, it says, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them throughout the generations, to come you are to make tassels on the corners of your garments with a blue cord on each tassel." So why does the New King James and the New International Version have a difference from the King James? The reason is that these newer versions are adapting the language of the verses to fit the definitions of the modern Jews and their practices. So these newer versions are trying to make the Tzitzit in the language the Gadil at the four corners. When we look at depictions of ancient Israelites, for example, the relief carvings of the Assyrians depicting the house of Yisrael going into exile, we can see in these images Israelite men wearing the kasut and the beged. The kasut is the blanket that they wore as jackets over the beged. And we see that both the beged, the undergarment, and the kasut, the overgarment, have the tzitzit, or the fringe along the edges. And we also see upon the tzitzit the band, which would have been blue or blue-violet. When we look at modern talit, we see again the tzitzit along the edges. We see the gadalim, or the gadil, at the four corners. And we also see the band of tekelet, the blue band, upon the tzitzit. When we look at traditional Ethiopian clothing, we can see some Hebrewisms. We have in this photo depicted Orthodox Ethiopian Christians. The Christianity of Ethiopia is older than the Christianity of Rome. When Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, the Israelites fled southward into Africa. Many Israelites came through Ethiopia, and many of the Ethiopians picked up Hebraic cultures. So you see these men wearing what is called a gabi. The gabi is comparable to the kasut, or the overgarment. And just like the kasut, the gabi is also used as a blanket. So we see along the edges of the gabi, there's a fringe, or tzitzit. And upon the fringe, there is a band of blue, or tekelet. Shemag or kafia is a garment that is usually used in the so-called Middle East by various cultures. It's usually used as a headdress. However, when it is draped around the shoulders, it actually mimics the kasut. And depending on the style of shemag, you will see that it has Tzitzit going along the border of the edges, and also sometimes they will have the Gedil or the Gadalim at the four corners. And of course, usually they will not have the band of blue or techelet. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please click the like button and subscribe and be notified of future videos. Shalom, family.